It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon in San Francisco, the Glen Park branch of the public library. People sitting at tables, reading books, browsing the internet, minding their own business. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. In the science fiction section, a young man sits at a table with his laptop open. He is 29 years old, slim, quiet, the kind of person you will walk past 100 times and never remember. He is typing, focused, completely unaware of what is about to happen. Two people nearby start arguing loudly, a stage distraction. The young man looked up for just a second. That second is all it takes. An FBI agent lunges forward and grabs his laptop before the young man can close it or press a single key. Within moments, agents are everywhere. The young man is pulled to his feet, handcuffed, and walked out of the library while stunned bystanders watch in silence. His name is Ross Ulbricht, and the open laptop in the FBI's agent's hand contains the evidence that will put him in prison for the rest of his life. Because Ross Ulbricht is not just a young man in a library, he is the founder, the owner, and the operator of the Silk Road, the most infamous, most profitable, and most dangerous criminal marketplace the internet has ever seen. A hidden online empire that processed over $1 billion in transactions, served hundreds of thousands of users across the world, and ran for nearly 3 years before anyone could find the man behind it. By the end of this video, you will understand every part of it, who Ross Ulbricht really was, how he built the Silk Road from nothing, how it worked, how big it became, how the FBI hunted him down, and how the whole thing collapsed in a library in San Francisco on a Tuesday afternoon. This is the full story from the very beginning to the very end, and nothing is left out. To understand the Silk Road, you first have to understand the man who built it, because Ross Ulbricht was not a career criminal. He was not someone who grew up in poverty looking for a way out. He was not motivated by greed in a way most people imagine. He was something more complicated than that, and that is what makes this story so difficult to look away from. Ross Ulbricht was born on the 27th of March 1984 in Austin, Texas. He grew up in a stable, loving family. His mother, Lynn, described him as a curious, warm, deeply principled child. He was an Eagle Scout, which is the highest rank achievable in the Boy Scout of America. It requires years of commitment, community service, and demonstrated leadership. It is not something a lazy or careless person can achieve. He was academically gifted. He studied physics at the University of Texas at Dallas, graduating with a degree that required genuine intellectual ability. After his physics degree, he went on to study material science and engineering at Penn State University, pursuing a postgraduate degree. He was on the path that most parents dream for their children. Educated, disciplined, ambitious, but something was shifting inside him during those days. Ross Ulbricht had developed a strong and deeply held libertarian worldview. Let me break this down here. What is libertarianism? It is a belief that individuals should have maximum freedom to make their own choices, and the government should have minimum power to interface with those choices. Libertarians believe that if something does not directly harm another person, the government has no right to control it, regulate it, or punish people for doing it. For us, this was not just a political opinion, it was a moral conviction. He believed that the war on drugs, the government's decade-long campaign to criminalize and punish drug use, was fundamentally wrong. Not because he thought drugs were harmless, but because he believed adults have the right to make their own decisions about what they put in their bodies without the government deciding for them. He believed that criminalizing personal choices cause more harm than the choices themselves, that putting people in prison for drug use destroy lives in ways that the drugs themselves often did not, that the entire system was broken and unjust. These were not fringe ideas. Libertarianism has millions of followers around the world, including economists, lawyers, academics, and politicians, but most people who hold these views express them through writing, through voting, and through debate. Ross Ulbricht decided to express his through action. In the years after university, Ross went through a period of searching. He tried various business ideas. He sold books online. He explored different ways of making a living that aligned with his values. He read extensively about economics, philosophy, and political theory. He was particularly influenced by the Austrian School of Economics, a branch of economic thought that strongly opposed government interventions in markets and celebrates free voluntary exchange between individuals. The Silk Road did not begin with one big idea. It grew slowly from a question Ross kept asking himself: what if there was a completely free market, a market where buyers and sellers could trade anything they wanted voluntarily without government interference, without restrictions, and without anyone being able to identify them or punish them for their choices? Not a theoretical market discussed in economics textbooks, a real one, an actual functioning marketplace where people could exchange goods freely, protected from from government surveillance and control. The technology to build that marketplace already existed. Ross just had to put it together in a new way. Two technologies sat at the heart of everything Ross was about to build: Tor and Bitcoin. To understand the Silk Road, you need to understand both. So let us start there. Tor stands for the Onion Router. It is a piece of software free to download that allows a person to browse the internet anonymously. When you normally browse the internet, every website you visit can see your IP address. An IP address is essentially your computer's home address on the internet. It identifies your device and through your internet provider can be traced back to your physical location and your real identity. Tor works by routing your internet traffic through a series of volunteer operated servers around the world, encrypting it at each step, so by the time your request reaches its destination, it is impossible to trace it back to you. Think of it like sending a letter through 10 different people in 10 different countries, each of whom only knows who they received it from and who they are passing it to, but nobody who sees the chain can trace it back to the original sender. Tor also allows people to create hidden websites called onion sites that exist on what is commonly called the dark web. These are websites that do not appear in normal search engines like Google, Safari, and the rest. You cannot find them by browsing normally. You can only access them by the Tor browser, and only if you know the specific address. They are by design invisible to the vast majority of internet users and to most law enforcement surveillance method. Bitcoin is the second essential technology. Bitcoin is a digital currency that exists entirely online with no physical form. It is not issued or controlled by any government or bank. Transactions on Bitcoin are recorded on a public record called the blockchain, which anyone can see. But here's the crazy part: the names of people making those transactions are not recorded. Instead, each user has a wallet address, a long string of random letters and numbers that act as their identifier. So while the transaction is visible, the identity of the person behind it is not, provided they take certain precautions. For someone trying to build an anonymous marketplace, Tor and Bitcoin together were the perfect combination. Tor hid the location of the website and the identities of each user. Bitcoin allowed money to change hands without bank accounts, without names, and without the kind of financial trail the law enforcement could follow. Ross Ulbricht understood this combination before almost anyone else applied it in this way. And in early 2011, sitting in his apartment largely alone, he started building. Ross taught himself to code at a level sufficient to build a functioning online marketplace. He worked alone for months building the platform piece by piece. He designed the user interface, he built the listing system, he built the payment processing system using Bitcoin. He built the messaging system that allowed buyers and sellers to communicate securely. He built feedback and rating system. He built dispute resolution process. This guy is crazy. He was in essence building Amazon, but for drugs, and hidden from the entire world except those who knew exactly where to look. He chose the name Silk Road deliberately. The original Silk Road was an ancient network of trade routes connecting China, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. For centuries, it was the backbone of international commerce, allowing goods, ideas, and cultures to move freely across vast distances. Ross saw his Silk Road as a modern version of that idea, a free trade route that crossed borders invisibly, connecting buyers and sellers without interference. In January 2011, the Silk Road went live for the first time. It had a handful of listings, mostly small quantities of psychedelic mushrooms that Ross himself had grown. The interface was basic, the user base was tiny, almost nobody knew it existed. Within months, that would change completely. Most people, when they think of an illegal marketplace on the internet, imagine something chaotic, dangerous, disorganized, a shadowy corner of the web where anything goes and nobody is safe. The Silk Road was the opposite of that. It was organized, professional, and structured more carefully than most legitimate businesses. And that professionalism is a large part of why it grew so fast and lasted as long as it did. Let us walk through exactly how it worked, step by step, from the moment a new user heard about it to the moment a package arrived at their door. The Silk Road could not be found through Google. I've explained that earlier. It could not be found through the normal search engine. It existed exclusively on the dark web, accessible only through the Tor browser. The address was a long string of random letters and numbers ending in .onion, the extension used for hidden Tor sites. New users typically found out about Silk Road through word of mouth, through online forums, or through articles written about it in the press. Once they had the address, they downloaded the Tor browser, which is free and relatively straightforward to install. Type in the address and arrived at the Silk Road's homepage. The homepage looks surprisingly normal, clean layout, categories on the left side, product listing in the center. It resembles a basic version of an online shopping site, which in functional terms, it is exactly what it was. Signing up requires no real name, no email address linked to any identity, and no personal information of any kind. Users created the username and password. That was it. The anonymity began at the very first step. Once inside, users could browse thousands of products, listings organized by category. The vast majority of listings were drugs. Cannabis was the most common, but the listing covered almost every category of illegal substance imaginable. Meth, heroin, prescription medications. The list continues. Each listings include a product description, the quantity available, and the price in Bitcoin, the seller's location, and their feedback rating. That feedback rating is important. We'll come back to it later. All transactions on the Silk Road were conducted in Bitcoin. No credit cards, no bank transfers, no PayPal, nothing that could connect a real name or a real bank account to a transaction. Here's how the payment process worked in simple terms. A buyer would first purchase Bitcoin through an exchange. In the early days of Silk Road, Bitcoin was not widely known or easily purchased, but as the site grew, so did the infrastructure around Bitcoin, making it progressively easier to obtain. Once a buyer had Bitcoin in their digital wallet, they would send the payment for their choosing product to an escrow address controlled by Silk Road platform. Escrow means the money is held by a neutral third party, in this case the Silk Road itself. Until the transaction is completed, the seller could see that the payment had been made but could not access the money until the buyer confirmed they had received their order. This system protected both parties. Buyers could not be scammed by sellers taking their money and sending nothing. Sellers had confidence that the payment was secured before they shipped anything. When the buyer confirmed the receipt of their order, the Bitcoin was released from escrow to the seller minus a commission taken by the Silk Road. That commission, typically between 6 and 10% of the transaction value, was how Ross Ulbricht made his money. You can see clearly now, this is a full business. So now back to the feedback system, why it works so well. One of the most important and most underappreciated feature of Silk Road was its feedback system. Every seller on the platform had a public rating based on reviews left by buyers. The system worked almost identical to the seller rating system on Amazon or eBay. After completing a purchase, buyers were encouraged to leave a review. They rated the product quality, the accuracy of the description, the speed of shipping, and the communication from the seller. These reviews were visible to all users. A seller with hundreds of 5-star reviews and a 98% positive rating was trustworthy. A seller with complaints about poor quality or non-delivery lost business fast. This created something extraordinary inside an illegal marketplace: genuine accountability. Sellers on Silk Road were motivated to provide exactly what they advertised, package it carefully, ship it promptly, and communicate professionally with their customers, because if they did not, their rating suffered and their sales dried up. What a genuine strategy. The Silk Road built a reputation for being safer and more reliable than buying drugs on the street. Users knew exactly what they were getting, how much and how pure it was. There was no physical danger, no meeting a dealer in a dark alley, no risk of violence, just an order placed online and a package arriving in the post. Ross Ulbricht did not allow everything to be sold on the Silk Road. Specific categories of products were explicitly banned from the platform from the beginning. Weapons were banned, child exploitation material was banned, stolen financial information like credit card details was banned, anything designed to harm a specific third party was banned, hitman services were banned, and the list continues. Ross maintained that the Silk Road was a platform for consensual transactions between adults making personal choices. The products he allowed were things he believed only affected the buyers themselves. The products he banned were things that directly harmed others. Whether that distinction hold up morally is a question reasonable people disagree on, but the rules existed, were enforced, and shaped the culture of the platform significantly. The Silk Road had a functioning customer service system. If a buyer did not receive their order or received something that did not match their listing description, they could open a dispute. The Silk Road team would review the evidence from both sides and make a ruling on whether a refund was appropriate. Ross Ulbricht and a small team of moderators spent significant time managing disputes, answering users' questions, and maintaining the community forums where users discussed products, sellers, and experience. There was also a forum attached to the Silk Road where users could post questions, share information, and discuss anything related to the platform and the broader philosophy behind it. Ross was an active participant in that forum, posting under his pseudonym, engaging with users, and articulating the ideology that he believed underpinned the entire enterprise. That pseudonym is important. It tells us something crucial about who Ross Ulbricht became as the Silk Road grew, and it is where the story starts to get much darker. In its first few weeks, the Silk Road was tiny, a handful of listings, a few dozens of users, a curiosity from small community of people who happened to be in the right online spaces to hear about it. Then, in June 2011, everything changed. A journalist writing for the technology and culture website Gawker published an article about the Silk Road. The article explained what it was, how to access it, and what it sold. It was read by millions of people. Within days of that article being published, the Silk Road's user base exploded. Traffic to the site multiplied overnight. New vendors was flooded in. New buyers arrived in waves. The platform that Ross had been quietly building in obscurity was suddenly the most talked about corner of the internet. It became worse that two United States senators, Charles Schumer and Joe Manchin, wrote a formal letter to the Drug Enforcement Administration, which is DEA, and the Attorney General, demanding that the Silk Road be shut down immediately. They called it the most brazen attempt to peddle drug online that they had ever seen. The irony is that their letter, widely covered in the press, introduced the Silk Road to millions more people who had never heard of it. There was no going back now. Ross Ulbricht had a decision to make: shut it down before it caught up with him, or go all in and build it into something much bigger. But guess what he did? He doubled down. At its peak, the Silk Road was operating at a scale that is genuinely difficult to comprehend. The platform had approximately 1 million registered user accounts. That is 1 million people who had gone through the process of downloading TThe, finding the site address, creating an account, and obtaining Bitcoin specifically to use the platform. Crazy things are happening. There were around 10,000 individual product listings at any given time, spread across dozens of categories. The vast majority were drug listings, cannabis products in every form, pharmaceutical drugs that required prescriptions in the real world were being available freely on the Silk Road. The catalog was effectively a comprehensive directory of every illegal or controlled substance a person might want to obtain. Vendors came from dozens of countries. Buyers were located across the world. The platform operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, processed transactions continuously. Between its launch in 2011 and its closure in 2013, the Silk Road processed approximately 9.5 million transactions. The total value of those transactions were approximately $1.2 billion. Ross Ulbricht's personal commission from those transactions were estimated at approximately $80 million. Let those numbers sit for a moment. $1.2 billion processed through a hidden website built by one person operating for less than 3 years. Isn't that crazy? As the Silk Road grew, Ross Ulbricht developed a public persona within the platform community. He called himself Dread Pirate Robert. The name came from the film The Princess Bride. In the film, Dread Pirate Robert is not one specific person. It is a title passed from one person to the next. Ross chose it deliberately, partly as misdirection to suggest that the Silk Road might be run by multiple people or that the identity was transferable, partly because it captured something about the persona he wanted to project. Dread Pirate Robert was not shy or hidden within the Silk Road community. He was active, vocal. He posted extensively in the Silk Road forums, engaging with users, explaining his vision, defending the platform ideology, and building a genuine community around the idea that what they were doing together was not just commerce, but a form of political resistance. He wrote about freedom, about the right of individuals to make their own choices, about the failure of the war on drugs, about building a better world through voluntary exchange. He was articulate, thoughtful, and genuinely believed in what he was saying. Users respected him. Many admired him. The Dread Pirate Robert persona became something close to a cult figure within the community. But behind that persona, the pressure of running an operation of this scale was building, and the decisions Ross began making as the pressure grew would eventually become some of the most damning evidence against him. As the Silk Road grew, Ross faced the kind of problem that any large organization faces: internet theft, employees who knew too much, people who threatened to expose him, people who tried to extort him. In one case, a former employee of the Silk Road who had been fired claimed to have access to the personal details of thousands of Silk Road users and threatened to release them unless Ross paid him a significant sum of money. Ross Ulbricht, according to evidence presented at his trial, responded to his threat by attempting to arrange the murder of the person making it. He allegedly paid an undercover law enforcement officer, who he believed was a hitman, approximately $150,000 in Bitcoin to have the former employee killed. He then allegedly received a photograph purporting to show the person dead and paid the remainder of the agreed fee. The murder did not actually take place. The person was not killed. The hitman was an undercover agent, and while Ross was never charged with murder or attempted murder in his actual trial because the evidence of the staged killing was complicated, the communications related to these alleged transactions were presented as evidence of his character and his willingness to use violence to protect his empire. Of course, as it should be for businesses like this. For a long time, the Silk Road seemed genuinely untouchable. The combination of TThe and Bitcoin created what appeared to be an impenetrable shield of anonymity. Law enforcement agencies around the world knew the Silk Road existed. They could see it, they could access it, they could even make purchases on it, but finding the person behind it seemed for a significant period almost impossible. The investigation into Silk Road involved multiple law enforcement agencies working across different angles simultaneously: the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, Home Homeland Security Investigations, the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Unit, the Baltimore Police Department. Each agency brought a different areas of expertise and pursued different threads of the investigation. What eventually brought Ross Ulbricht down was not one breakthrough moment. It was the slow accumulation of many small threads, most of them connected to mistakes that Ross himself had made, many of them years before the investigation reached him. The first mistake is the forum post. Before Silk Road became publicly known, before it had any significant user base, Ross Ulbricht made a mistake that seemed almost unbelievable. He posted a message on a public internet forum called Stack Overflow, a website used by software developers to ask and answer technical questions. The post asked a specific technical question about the kind of programming he was doing to build a Silk Road. The username he used for that post was not Dread Pirate Robert. It was not an anonymous handle. It was Althoid, a username he had also used on a separate forum where he had posted a message promoting the Silk Road in its very early days. The Stack Overflow post was later edited to remove some identifying information, but before it was edited, it included his real Gmail address as a point of contact. His real Gmail address linked to his real name, posted publicly on a forum asking for help building the software that would become the Silk Road. Wow, crazy things happening here. Investigators eventually found this post. They traced the username Althoid across multiple platforms. They found a connection between the username that had promoted the Silk Road and the Gmail account that belonged to Ross Ulbricht. That connection became one of the central threads of the case. You think this is all? No, we have the second mistake: the servers. The Silk Road servers, the computers that physically hosted the website and stored all of its data, needed to be hidden just as carefully as the identities of its users. As you all know, a server has a physical location. Find a server and you can potentially find the person running it. Ross used a configuration intended to hide the server's true IP address behind Tor, but a technical misconfiguration in one part of the server setup caused it to occasionally leak its real IP address, the address that revealed where the server was actually located. The law enforcement agent who was carefully probing the Silk Road's infrastructure noticed this leak. The real IP address pointed to a server located in Iceland. Investigators were able to obtain a copy of that server's data, which contained an enormous amount of information about the Silk Road's operation. This was a critical breakthrough. It gave investigators access to the site's internal logs, transaction records, and communication data. It allowed them to begin building a detailed picture of how the operation worked and who was running it. And we have the third mistake: the identity slip. As investigators closed on Ross Ulbricht's identity, they accumulated more and more evidence connecting him specifically to Dread Pirate Robert's account. His online activity pattern, the time he was online, the writing style of his forum posts, the specific phrases and ideas he used, which matched writings published under his real name elsewhere online, involved a fake identity document. Ross Ulbricht had attempted to obtain fake identification documents through the Silk Road. A package containing fake IDs was intercepted when investigators visited that house to question the resident about the package. Guess who the resident was? It was Ross Ulbricht. He told investigators he had no idea what they were talking about. He suggests that anyone could have used his address. It was not enough to arrest him at the point, but it placed him directly in the investigators' line of sight in the most concrete, visible way. And now to the fourth mistake: the Bitcoin trail. Bitcoin is often described as anonymous, and in many respects it is, but it is not perfectly anonymous. Every Bitcoin transaction is recorded permanently on the blockchain, the public ledger that tracks every movement of every Bitcoin in existence. The names of the people making transactions are not recorded, but the wallet addresses are. Forensic analysts working on the Silk Road investigation developed increasingly sophisticated methods of tracing Bitcoin transactions across the blockchain. By following the movement of funds from the Silk Road's escrow account through multiple wallets, they were able to identify patterns that pointed towards specific individuals and entities. The blockchain forensic work eventually helped investigators identify Bitcoin wallets connected to Ross Ulbricht and trace the movement of funds in ways that supported the case against him. Now they are closing in. By the summer of 2013, investigators had built a substantial case. They had connected the Ross Ulbricht's real identity to the Dread Pirate Robert's account through multiple independent threads of evidence. They knew his name, they knew his face, they knew his address in San Francisco. They knew he was the person running the Silk Road, but they needed one thing. What they needed was to catch him in the act, locked in the Silk Road's administrative system with his laptop open and unlocked, so that the data on the laptop, the live evidence of the operation, could be seized before he had any chance to encrypt or delete it. They needed to catch him by surprise in public, and they had a plan to do exactly that. By October 2013, the FBI was ready to move. The case against Ross Ulbricht was built. The evidence was substantial. All they needed was the moment. Investigators had been watching Ross Ulbricht. They knew he used the Glen Park branch of the San Francisco Public Library to connect to the internet and manage the Silk Road remotely. So they chose the library as a location for their arrest. This was intentional and well calculated. A library was ideal for two reasons. First, it was a public place where Ross would not be expecting law enforcement to move on him. Second, and most importantly, it was a place where he would almost certainly have his laptop open and actively connected to the Silk Road's administrative system. But they had one challenge. The challenge was seizing the laptop before he could close or press any key that would lock or encrypt the device. Modern encryption software can make a locked laptop essentially impossible to access without password. If Ross managed to close the lid or press a single key combination before the laptop was in FBI's hand, vast amount of critical evidence would become permanently inaccessible. So the FBI staged a distraction to fix this issue. On the 2nd of October 2013, a team of agents positioned themselves throughout the library. Two agents, a man and a woman, were placed near Ross in the science fiction section. At a prearranged signal, the two agents staged a loud, convincing argument with each other, drawing the attention of everyone nearby, including Ross. He looked up just for a second to see what was going on. An agent lunged forward and grabbed the laptop from the table before Ross could react. Other agents immediately identified themselves and moved to restrain him. It was over in seconds. Ross Ulbricht was handcuffed and arrested. His laptop was open, unlocked, and actively logged into the Silk Road's administrative back end. The screen showed the internal management system of the platform he had built and run for nearly 3 years. The evidence on the laptop was devastating. Private messages between Ross Ulbricht and his staff, transaction records, vendor communications, his personal journal in which he had documented his journey building the Silk Road in remarkable detail, including his feelings about the operation, his fears about being caught, and entries that directly contradicted some of the defenses his legal team would later attempt to mount. The Silk Road was shut down within hours of his arrest. A notice from the FBI replaced the homepage. The empire was over. But here's where the story takes a turn that almost nobody saw coming. Because while the FBI was investigating Ross Ulbricht, two of the agents involved in the investigation were secretly committing serious crimes of their own. Two law enforcement agents who had worked on the Silk Road case were later charged, tried, and convicted of crimes committed during the very investigation that brought Ross Ulbricht down. The first was Sean Bridges, a Secret Service agent assigned to the Baltimore-based task force investigating the Silk Road. The second was Carl Foss, a Drug Enforcement Administration agent who had worked undercover on the case. Carl Foss had created multiple undercover personas to infiltrate the Silk Road and gather intelligence on its operation. One of those personas had developed a direct communication relationship with Red Parrot Roberts, meaning with Ross Ulbricht himself. Foss used that access in ways that went far beyond his authorized undercover role. He accepted Bitcoin payment from Ross Ulbricht in exchange for providing information about the investigation. He tipped Ross off about certain aspects of what law enforcement knew. He was in plain terms selling information to the man he was supposed to be investigating. This guy is crazy. He also stole Bitcoin directly using his access to accounts connected to the Silk Road's investigation. Foss transferred Bitcoins belonging to the operation into his own personal wallet. He then attempted to disguise the origin of the funds by moving them through multiple accounts. Sean Bridges committed a similar theft using his position on the task force, which gave him access to certain accounts connected to the Silk Road system. Bridges transferred approximately $800,000 worth of Bitcoin into his own account. He did this in weeks before the Silk Road was shut down. Knowing that the shutdown was imminent and that the window to steal was closing, both men attempted to cover their tracks but failed. Bridges was sentenced to nearly 6 years in federal prison. Foss was sentenced to 6.5 years. The corruption of these two agents became a significant issue during Ross Ulbricht's trial. His defense team argued that the corrupt conduct of Foss and Bridges had tainted the investigation and compromised the evidence. They argued that Ross had been manipulated and deceived by law enforcement agents who were themselves criminals. The judge largely rejected this argument as grounds for dismissing the case. The core evidence against Ross Ulbricht, his laptop, his journal, his server data, the blockchain records, was considered sufficient and untainted by the misconduct of Foss and Bridges. But the existence of two corrupt federal agents at the heart of the investigation raised serious and uncomfortable questions about the integrity of the entire operation. Questions that Ross Ulbricht supporters continue to raise till this day. The trial of Ross Ulbricht began in January 2015 in the Southern District of New York. It lasted approximately 4 weeks. It was one of the most closely watched criminal trials in the history of internet crime. Ross Ulbricht faced 7 charges in total: drug trafficking conspiracy, continuing a criminal enterprise, computer hacking conspiracy, money laundering conspiracy, and several related charges. The prosecution's case was built on the mountain of evidence seized from his laptop and from Silk Road servers. The private messages, the journal entries, the transaction records, the communications with vendors and staffs, the evidence connecting his identity to the Dread Pirate Roberts account across multiple independent threads. The prosecution argued that Ross Ulbricht had knowingly and deliberately built an operation, a criminal marketplace that had facilitated the sales of enormous quantity of illegal drugs, contributing directly to addiction, overdose, and death. They argued he has done so for personal profit, amassing tens of millions of dollars in Bitcoin while hiding behind a philosophy of freedom to disguise what was essentially a drug trafficking operation. Ross Ulbricht's defense team, led by Anthony Joshua Drather, put forward an ambitious argument. They admitted that Ross had created the Silk Road in its early days, but they claimed he had handed over control to others long before the crimes in the indictment were committed. Their argument was that Ross had been set up as a fall guy. The real operators, they said, had lured him back into a visible role, specifically so he would take the blame if the site was ever shut down. They pointed to the corrupt conduct of Carl Foss and Sean Bridges as evidence that the investigation had been compromised. They argued that evidence had been planted and manipulated. The defense also challenged the technical evidence, arguing that blockchain analysis and digital forensics were not as reliable as the prosecution claimed. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They returned a verdict of guilty on all 7 counts. Less than 4 hours to reach a verdict in one of the most complex digital crime cases ever prosecuted. The spread of the deliberation was widely interpreted as a signal of how overwhelming the jury found the evidence against Ross Ulbricht. On the 29th of May 2015, Judge Catherine Forrest sentenced Ross Ulbricht to 2 life terms in federal prison plus 40 years with no possibility of parole. It was the most severe sentence available under the law for the charges he faced. The judge gave no chance of parole, meaning that under the sentence as handed down, Ross Ulbricht will die in prison. The judge explained her reasoning. She said the sentence was necessary to send a clear message that operating a criminal enterprise of this scale, regardless of the technology used to do it or the ideology used to justify it, will be treated with maximum severity by the American justice system. Ross Ulbricht, 30 years old at the time of sentencing, stood in the courtroom and addressed the judge. He said he was not the person he was when he created the Silk Road. He said he had grown and changed. He asked for mercy, but guess what? He did not receive it. The sentence divided opinion immediately. Supporters of Ross Ulbricht argued 2 life sentences without parole for a non-violent offender was too harsh. They compared it to sentences handed to murderers and pointed out that Ross had never physically harmed anyone. His mother, Lynn Ulbricht, became one of the most visible advocates for her son's release. She has spoken publicly, written extensively, and campaigned tirelessly for the sentence reduction or presidential clemency. She argued that her son was made an example of in a way that was never just nor proportionate. His supporters launched campaigns, they created websites, they raised money for legal appeals. The Free Ross movement became sustained efforts that lasted for long. On the other side, prosecutors and victims advocates argued that drugs sold through the Silk Road had contributed directly to overdose death, that the human cost of $1 billion worth of drug transactions was not abstract, that real people had become addicted to substances purchased through the platform. Both arguments contain truth. Both deserve to be heard. In January 2025, Ross Ulbricht was granted a full pardon by President Donald Trump, who had promised during his campaign to free him. After more than 11 years in federal prison, Ross Ulbricht walked free. The pardon did not erase his conviction. It did not resolve the debate about whether his sentence had been just, but it ended his imprisonment. He was released to a world that had changed enormously since the day he was arrested in that San Francisco library. The Silk Road itself has spawned numerous successors in years after its closure. Within months of the FBI shutting it down, new dark web marketplace had emerged to fill the space it left. Silk Road 2 launched almost immediately. Run by former Silk Road moderators, it was shut down by law enforcement within a year. Others followed. Alphabet, Hansard, Dream Market. The pattern repeated itself each time. The marketplace grew, thrived, and it was eventually shut down. After some time, another took its place. The dark web drug trade that Ross Ulbricht pioneered did not end with his arrest. It evolved, it diversified, it became more sophisticated. The infrastructure he helped create, the combination of Thor anonymity and Bitcoin payments applied to illegal commerce, became a template for an entire ecosystem of hidden online marketplaces that continues to operate today. Ross Ulbricht was 26 years old when he launched the Silk Road from his laptop. He was 29 when an FBI agent grabbed the laptop out of his hand in a public library. He spent the next 11 years of his life in federal prison before a presidential pardon set him free. The story of Silk Road is not simply a story about drugs or crime or dark web. It's a story about ideas and their consequences, about what happened when a person becomes so convinced of the rightness of their own ideology that they stop seeing the harm it caused to real people, about the gap between philosophy of freedom and the reality of what that philosophy looked like when applied to $1 billion worth of drug transactions. Ross Ulbricht believed he was building something that would change the world for the better. He believed he was fighting a system that was broken and unjust. He was intelligent, disciplined, creative, and committed. He built something remarkable from nothing, using tools that barely existed and ideas that nobody had applied in this way before, that made him $80 million while others bore the consequences of what he was selling. The Silk Road changed the internet, it changed law enforcement, it changed the drug trade, it changed how governments think about cryptocurrency and anonymity online. The world that exists today, the dark web marketplace, the blockchain forensic industry, the international cooperation between law enforcement agencies on cybercrime, all of it was shaped in part by what Ross Ulbricht built in his apartment in 2011. The dark web market he inspired are still running, and the question his story raises about freedom, harm, power, and the internet had not been answered. They may never be. If you made it to the end of this video, you now know about Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road than most people who have followed the story for years. Drop a comment below. What do you think about this story? Was Ross Ulbricht a visionary or a criminal, or even both? And here's the crazy part: I read every single comment and I want to know where you stand on this one. If this is the kind of video you come here for, subscribe. Every video on this channel goes deep every time. The next video is already waiting for you. Go watch it now. But before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I will see you in the next one.